What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark, MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and I'm getting really close to the final best of list. But I've got one more. And this one's important to me because, again, I'm a blind film critic, and this is my opportunity to recognize the best in audio description of 2024. So these are my favorite audio description tracks from the past year. I have a couple on this list. I don't want to scare you away, but there's 40. So I'm going to try to move through them pretty quickly and say why I like them. One of the things that I struggled with this year was whether or not, like, who to name. And I tried not to pay attention. I got onboarded and ended up working for two different audio description companies in 2024. So I've been trying actually not to pay attention to who made the audio description and who's responsible. Sometimes with narrators, it's really hard because I recognize a voice and I know who that is. But I didn't want it to seem like like trying to be neutral here is what I'm trying to do. Is I don't want to give anybody an unfair advantage, but I am addressing that up front. Is that yes, I have worked for two audio description companies, Descriptive Video Works and International Digital Center. So I'm sure they're on the list, but we're just going to talk about the movies and why I liked the audio description track and what I remember about them being on here, and why they were exceptional tracks, enough to make my top 40 list. I did cut it down. I had a little bit more than 40. I just rounded off. So I didn't quite have 50. So of tracks that I liked, so I just cut down to 40 just because it felt like a clean number. So without further ado, let's get into it, and we'll work our way up to what I think my favorite audio description track of the year is. There's still some films that I haven't heard the audio description track for that were Oscar bait films that I was given a screener for, but the screener didn't have audio description. Sorry if you made one of those tracks and you didn't make the cut. Brutalist, a complete unknown. What else? I'm trying to think of maybe a couple of those are at least two. Just that I have not seen with audio description. So it doesn't mean that they're bad, or that maybe they would have made the list. I don't know. But I'm waiting until they hit streaming services where I don't have to pay for them. So I pay for enough as it is. Coming in at the bottom of my list in 40th, and I'm using assistive technology to do this, which is great. So number 40 is Wolves. This is the Apple Plus movie. The reason why I thought it was exceptional, the thing is it had a little bit of a difficulty in that George Clooney and Brad Pitt's characters did not have names. So it had to navigate what seems like almost an untenable way of keeping their characters separate, but at the same time, they didn't ever have names. So I think the way that they did it with the 1 and 2 was probably the best way to do it. You just had to remember which one was 1 and which one was 2. And otherwise, it was all just based on what do they look like, what do other people look like. It's amazing how little names and stuff played into Wolves, but I thought that was a good movie. Wolves. Anyway, moving up the list to number 39. Don't Move. It's a Netflix original film. It's a horror thriller where the woman's paralyzed and she's like slowly like making her way through things. A lot of set pieces. There were a couple moments that were really good where we got these sort of creepy moments. I don't like the movie as much because he just kind of seemed to magically appear out of nowhere. Like he always knew where he was going no matter what, even though they're in the middle of nowhere in the woods. But I mean, she found a pile of ants pretty quickly. And that was a horrifying situation for her to be in as somebody who's basically paralyzed, and doesn't want to move because, well, he's nearby and the ants are crawling on her and stuff like that was described, and it gave me the EBGBs, which is good. It should, because that's of the genre. Moving up the list, number 38. Lisa Frankenstein. We have a non-verbal character here for the most part. We have, well, Frankenstein. I don't know, the boy that she revives, played by Cole Sprouse. He is basically non-verbal for like most of the movie, and there's still some violence and some gore that's in this that takes place as well, and that was well described. But it was also, he was very emotive, and I liked how this track captured his emotions and really helped sell a character in a very weird sort of horror comedy that's not everybody loved. I liked it, but not everybody loved it, and they had this sort of like weird relationship, and yeah. He does a lot of weird things, and I thought the audio description showed up for him every bit along the way. Moving up the list, number 37. Carry On. This is the Jason Bateman, Taron Egerton thriller, which relied a lot on who's looking at what when, who's trying to do something sly under the table, who's passing a package to who, what's Jason Bateman looking at, what's he watching, so I thought they did a really nice job with this track as well. And there was the whole sniper dot sequence, which we've seen played out before, but it was done. Yeah, I thought this was a strong track. So moving up the list, I don't know what I'm on anymore. 36, maybe. Misspelled grammatical error cap. Mea culpa. Yeah, a Tyler Perry movie made the list. Specifically Mea Culpa, which is a weird sort of like, is he a serial killer? Is he not a serial killer? I don't know, but I'm gonna fuck him anyway. Type of movie where a lawyer has Trevante Rhodes is the male lead here. And there were a couple of scenes that I really loved. And I was like, this is a Tyler Perry movie? This dude used to make Christian movies. What the fuck is he doing? Like, the sex scenes were really well described. There was a painting that was above. I remember the painting being like really well described. And thinking like, wow, that's really in-depth description of this painting. There were a couple of things like that that put Mea Culpa on the list. There were some really sort of glowing moments of audio description. To be fair, his other film, Divorce in the Black, also had a couple of scenes too, and it came close. But I didn't want too many Tyler Perry movies on here. So Mea Culpa was the best one. But yeah, Divorce in the Black even had the like really good description in terms of like when she goes back and like her bedroom, like she goes home to her parents' house, and like I thought her bedroom was really well described. There were like some moments where it just pops. You're like, man, that's some really good description. All of a sudden, thank you. I feel like I've lived in this room before. So moving up the list to what I think is number 35. Cuckoo. I've seen this movie twice. And yeah, it deserves to be here. I'm not like 100% sure tonally the narrator is the scariest voice in the world, but man, this the movie has a lot of those like misshapen, creepy, like widening of the mouth and screaming and jerky body movement things that horror movies do, and the track does a good job of capturing that and trying to make sense of it. Cuckoo's a movie that really struggles to make sense. I think it made more sense to me the second time through, but still, I'm not 100% sure that I fully understand what's going on in this movie. I love it for all of those reasons, but I also really enjoy the audio description track here. So Cuckoo makes the list. Moving up the list to number 4. A Family Affair, the Nicole Kidman Zac Efron movie. which deserves to be here. I know it doesn't seem like you're like, isn't this just like a basic ass rom com? It is. But let me tell you, and I felt this too with sometimes you can tell like when people just know, you know, when something's getting a little steamy, there's a little bit of some attraction. Somebody in this movie really finds Zac Efron to be super attractive because every scene where he's in and the scenes where he's with like Nicole or he has his shirt off. I mean, the description of Zac Efron as a person, as an object of sexual desire, is pretty flawless. It's just, um, it's it was sort of like the same thing. I can't put it on here because it's not a film from 2024, but I rewatched Catwoman for its 20th anniversary last year, and they did the same thing with Benjamin Bratt, where like every time he removed his shirt, we heard all about his abs, his like perfect abs. I'm like, what is going on in this movie? But here it actually kind of, at least it is the rom-com, so Nicole and Zach are supposed to be finding love, against all odds. So I liked it. Moving up the list, number, I don't know what I'm on, 33 or something. Kill. Yeah. This movie's basically like non-stop action. It's just non-stop action. I mean, it's John Wick on a train. So the violence. Plus, it also had to be translated. So yeah, Kill sort of defaultly makes it onto my list for having so much it has to do. There are a lot of films like this, and certainly Kill was one of them. Moving to the list, number 32, Love Lies Bleeding. Yes. I liked Love Lies Bleeding. I thought the audio description was really good. There was stuff that, I mean, it starts right off at the beginning when she's getting in that toilet, she's in there scrubbing that toilet. And I thought what was really good about Love Lies Bleeding is that it really sort of captured the grunginess of it all. Like there was a little bit of like dirt and filth that came along with some of this, the grime. Plus there's some really weird shit that happens later on, like towards the end of the movie, just some absolute bonker bananas. Like the film, Rose Glass directed a film that was moving in like a normal direction, and then it just like lost its mind towards the end of the movie, and it still had to be described. So moving up the list, number 31, Night Bitch. Yeah. I've seen this twice. The second time with audio description is what got it on the list, obviously. And yeah, the whole acting like a wolf thing, but mainly also the unabashed I'm glad you're not afraid to go there type of thing. She sort of like bleeds out in the shower from a certain, sort of has like a little bit of a period blood thing in the shower, and it goes, I mean, it mentions it, and having those moments in there, and also like the weird hairs that she plays with. There's an element of body horror to Night Bitch that I think the audio description track nailed, and that's why Night Bitch made the list. It's not nearly the substance. We'll get to that. Moving up the list, number 30. The Fall Guy. It's a like non-stop action movie, tons of stunts. It's a movie about stunt people made by stunt people. So, of course, this movie had excellent audio description. I've seen this twice. And yeah, I really enjoyed the audio description track to it. Yeah, it's a lot of these are not perfect, and they don't have until sort of like ethnic racial audio description becomes more of the norm. I have to look to films as like, what is it? What are you? What is your primary objective? And Fall Guy is an action movie. I thought did a really good job of selling the action. I thought the set pieces, the stunts, and everything were described really well. Or are all the characters described really well? Not really, but were all the stunts, the massive stunt pieces that they set up? Yeah, they were all described really well, and that's sort of the reason you go watch Fall Guy, is for that reason. I would like other things to come along, but then again, this is only at number 30, and there are more films above it. Moving up the list, Strange Darling. This is a film. How do I describe Strange Darling without completely? This is a film I don't want to describe. I would say there are a lot of jumps in time. That's all you get, because I still don't think enough people have seen Strange Darling, and Strange Darling is a film that you should go into knowing as little as humanly possible. So I'm just gonna tip my hat to the people who made Strange Darling and be like, thank you, because this film relies heavily on audio description, but also I can't tell you why. Moving up the list. Don't watch it without audio description, it won't make any sense. Moving up the list. The Beekeeper. Yeah, this is Jason Statham. This was an action movie. I remember there was a scene. One of the reasons I remember a couple of the action set pieces, and they were really cool. There was a scene where he went into a barn, and like he was about to have a fight with some people who were going to be coming in on him, and they looked around the room, and it pointed out like all of the dangerous items in the room, like ahead of time. It was like, check this out. We've got a blade over here. We've got a hook hanging from the ceiling. Lo and behold, Jason Statham made somebody die on every single one of them. I thought that was great. Yeah, again, so it's one of those things where it's like, for an action movie, it did exactly everything it was supposed to do. The action was really fun, and it knew exactly what type of movie it was and what it was describing, so kudos. Moving up the list, too. Roadhouse, which is like the exact same thing. These films are like neck and neck with each other because they're basically the same. They're both kind of like dumb action movies that were entertaining for what they were. And Roadhouse is another film that has plenty of action sequences. It has a lot of over-the-top action sequences that are kind of silly, like having to do with boats, and but also just like brawls, Jake Gyllenhaal brawling. And I thought the audio description track does a really good job of capturing those fight scenes. So I loved Roadhouse. Moving up the list, I forgot what I'm at. Better Man is next. I want to say this is 26. Might be, maybe not. This is the Robbie Williams biopic. Again, there's a lot happening in this movie. I liked, there were some really specific things that stood out to me, like the time when he signs his name for the first time as like a dick that's like squirting. That was like his signature. But also there's a car crash in this that is so well described. I mean, just brilliant. Just like one of the standout moments that I remember from audio description. Plus, I have to give a shout out to Paramount, because Paramount was one of the only people that, when they provided me with screeners this year, actually gave me audio description. So when I got my screeners for Better Man on September 5, they came with audio description. Kudos. Brilliant. Thank you. So, yeah, I really like the track to Better Man. Moving up the list. Number 25? Yes, number 25. A Quiet Place, Day One. Well, it's a movie with not a lot of dialogue. Creepy aliens moving around. Everybody sort of has to communicate as silently as humanly possible. I would say the difficulty of description here is important. There are a lot of things that happen, and small moments too, like how the simple tearing of your clothing will attract their attention, and then suddenly that dude was gone. Like, just a little tear in the clothing, oh shit, gone. But the weird like mushroom things they come from, and I thought that was weird. Like the feeding, there were so many things that Quiet Place Day One introduced into a franchise that we've already seen that I thought this was a really great audio description. So, plus there's a cat, like the whole movie. There's like I mean, the cat is so heavily featured. So again, you have like a nonverbal character that you have to follow in what is almost entirely a nonverbal movie to begin with. So, yeah, moving up the list, number 24.
Cat Smile 2.
Smile 2. Well, you've got gore. That's one of lots of gore. Described really well. Man, that scene where he's beating himself in the face. I thought the description there was really good, but also she's losing her mind. Like the whole thing. Naomi Scott delivered a hell of a performance, and she's losing her mind like the whole movie. She already was. That's one of the things I actually liked about Smile 2. This movie made my top 10 horror movie list of the year, and Parker Finn is also, more broadly, he's an honorable mention for director. And I should have mentioned that some of these other movies also show up on other lists. Smile 2 is also on. Naomi Scott as a honorable mention in actress. So, yeah, she's losing her absolute mind in this movie. She's somebody who's struggling with addiction and loss, and the the weird sort of struggle of being a celebrity, and then Smile attacks her. Like she's already going through the ringer, and then this thing attacked, and it's just it was great. I mean, so many great things, and then the twists I felt like they didn't overplay, and I didn't quite get the twist when it came. I was like, oh shit, I did not see that coming. So I was pleasantly surprised, and it came from a great audio description track for Smile 2. So that, like the scene where hair's falling out, like she's pulling at her hair, it's just a lot of things in Smile 2. Moving up the list, number 23.
Cat by Cat saw grammatical error. Cat the all cat.
I saw TV Glow. I've seen this movie twice. This is where else has this film been on my list? I definitely put her on my best director list of the year. Jane Schoenberg. It's a bold directorial standout for me of the year. And I think the audio description track captures the incredible oddness about the movie that this thing has. It's very auteur directed. It's not full on horror in the way that you would expect a horror movie to be, but it has horror elements to it. It's about identity. It's about culture. It's about so many different things. And Jane Schoenberg directed a film that is maybe not the most obvious film of the year to love, but it's one of the weirdest films that doesn't seem to fit into a specific box. Like it doesn't want a box. So as an audio description track, how do you navigate it? Is it a drama? Is it a horror movie? Is it like, what is it? It's PG-13, so the horror is not extreme. You're not getting, when you do get horror, when you do get gore, it's not like extreme gore. So, you just have to find all the little weird moments that she puts into this thing. A lot of it having to do with the TV show that they watch and describing those visuals to us. But some of them are just like really weird moments in time, like where he's like climbing into the TV itself, stuff like that. Anyway, moving up the list, number 22.
Cat Alien.
Alien Romulus. I've seen this movie twice. Love the audio description track for this as well. This is a great audio description track. Not only do you have the creatures that you have to describe in the fights, but the acid and the way that's one of the things I love about this movie is how Fede Alvarez played with acid in this movie. He certainly leans in a lot to what other people have done, but there are some seriously gory moments in here that have to do with the acid and how it hits. And there's also there's that zero gravity acid floating sequence that one of our characters is put through. You of course have the chestburster sequence. There are plenty of times here to recognize an Alien Romulus. It feels like the kind of movie that would be on the audio description track unless you just totally whiffed it, It's the kind of movie where like you walk in, you're like, what happened? Where's the audio description? You know, like um, it sets you up for greatness. All you have to do is follow through. Moving up the list, number 21, Hitman. Yeah, I mean, he's got like 1,000 different disguises in this movie, so I thought this movie was excellent and really nailed that. For those reasons, I've seen this movie twice. It's deceptive because it's kind of a comedy, so it doesn't necessarily grab you right away as being like comedies have great audio description. But it's also not like a slapstick comedy. It's not a comedy that relies a ton on sight gags. It's Richard Linklater comedy, and his beats hit completely different. So it relies on Glenn Powell's performance on the script. So it's sort of deceptive, but he's constantly having to put on a different disguise in order to do his job. So there's a scene where they're communicating verbally, but also physically different. You know, they want people to hear what's going on, but physically, it's being communicated differently because they can't see the conversation. So stuff like that. I just thought Hitman was really good. So it's on my broader list. A lot of great tracks this year. Number 20,
Cap Shirley.
Shirley. Bet you didn't expect to hear this movie on there. People forgot this movie existed. I love the audio description track. When this movie came out, I keep a list, and I wrote down, and I remembered why I liked this movie. It had really great description in terms of, I was really taken with the look. It's a biopic about a famous black figure, and it actually takes time to point out who the people are, what they're wearing, and really specific hairstyles instead of just curly hair. I mean, I got actual hairstyles that I felt like, as a person who knows nothing about black hair, that I felt like, wow, I haven't heard any other track try to approach it from this way before. So, it's a drama, and deceptively dramas, Maria didn't quite make the cut for me. I really love Maria's track too. That was on a little bit of a longer list. I could have had that on there. It's one of the films I just ended up not making that list either. Dramas are deceptively hard to nail because it's like, what are you looking at? Well, there's no gore to describe. There's no action. Nobody's falling down the stairs. So what do you highlight? Well, you highlight the people and the performances. And I thought Shirley did a really good job of that. So moving up the list, number 19, Babes. I've seen this movie twice. I love that it's not afraid. That's what I love about this track, is that the film has a lot of humor that is incredibly risque, and this track is not afraid to lean in on it. That's what I love about Babes. It's a raunchy comedy with raunchy audio description. So, yeah, highlights the humor of it. Again, I don't think this is a comedy that had necessarily the best representation, but at the same time, the opening scene is it takes place at a movie theater where her best friend has to look at her vagina in the middle of a movie theater and to see if it's dripping, to see whether or not her water broke, because she can't tell, and that's the whole sequence. That's how the movie starts. So it's one of those movies where it just is not, it's a movie that's not afraid, and it had audio description that wasn't afraid either. Moving up the list, number 18.
Cap Inside, Cap Out 2.
Inside Out 2. I really like this audio description. I've seen this movie twice. The funny thing is, I wouldn't have put this movie on the list initially. This movie wasn't on the list initially because I had such a poor experience in my theater with this movie that I didn't really get the audio description because they kept cutting in and out. And I would have just been like, it was fine. I don't know. It's just not caught what the standouts were. But I really love so many of the moments that it captures in terms of the emotions of the characters, but also a lot of the humor with Pouchy, and when they go down into the dark, deep dark secret area. So repressed memory, repressed emotions, that whole thing. I thought that was really funny. There's Anxiety's little thing towards the end when she's like swirling around, and there are plenty of moments where the description is standout, and it's a great track. So, moving up the list, We Live in Time. I've seen this movie twice as well. Love it. It's a movie that jumps around in time. So that's its thing. In case you're like, oh, it's a drama. How did it deceptively make this list? Well, it's a movie that does not tell itself linear. So you're constantly having to jump around in time, and it's trying to keep track of where we are by telling you, like, younger, older, their kid, they have a kid, they don't have a kid. I mean, it's movie's all over the place. So because of that, I saw it once without audio description as a screener, and then got later with audio description. So the first time through, I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, I was so lost. I love a couple of these experiences that I've had because of the way I was given screeners. The first time I was like, I don't know what this is, man. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I can't follow this movie. And then I saw it with audio description. I was like, oh, wow, game changer, you know? So, and suddenly everything made sense, and suddenly a movie that went from being I could care less about this movie, went to being one of my favorite movies of the year. So this audio description track made a huge difference for me. I think probably because I did see it both ways. I was like, oh my God, man, this movie needed audio description. I was like, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that was happening. So it's also just because of the fact that I've seen this movie both ways, without and with. And I can tell you, it absolutely does need it. Some films, I guess we could stumble through. This is not one of them. Moving up the list. Res Ball. I really love this track, and I love the fact that it is actually appropriate casting too, in so much that they made sure that the narrator, writer, narrator team actually were indigenous people of some, I mean, I know we got Elizabeth Warren who's like, I'm 1/32. It's like, girl. Anyway, but I really love this audio description track and how it navigates this. Again, it's a very deceptive track. You're like, isn't this a drama? Isn't this just a random Netflix movie? Yeah, it is. It is. I've seen this movie twice. It's also a basketball drama that the characters in it move seamlessly from English to Navajo. Don't see that every day. So there's a little bit of that has to come into the audio description as well, because it's not entirely in the English language, which means that if Res Ball did not have audio description, it would be unwatchable, or at least borderline unwatchable. You know what I'm saying? Like, for a blind, like, what joy would you get out of a basketball movie where the characters occasionally don't speak in English? It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, of course, this is a great track. So I really appreciate the work that went into Res Ball, and the fact that the representation actually mattered, and you could feel it not only there, but you can feel when people are writing the representation for their own community. It's like what I felt with Shirley. I was like, that representation is also behind the audio description, and they're pushing it into the film, and then you can sort of tell when the audio description is not, and there isn't that same level, and they don't know how to represent a community or a culture that they're not a part of, or understand the importance of it. But this came through in a big way. So Res Ball's on my list. Moving up the list, 2. Beetlejuice. Again, kind of like a easy swing. There was a lot of weird shit that was happening in this movie. There was the how do we get rid of Jeffrey Jones question that had to be answered. A lot of things that they do in the afterlife, the other world, I don't know, wherever you want to call it. It's not hell, but the waiting room type thing, where they go, and all the various waiting room. I thought the description for those people in the waiting room were really good. There's a lot of really specific description here that I thought was really nice. And So yes, this makes the cut. Moving up the list,
Cap the Cap Wild Cap Robot.
The Wild Robot. I've seen this movie twice. I love it. Again, I mean, at the beginning of the film, she can't hear the animals, so you've got her interacting and the animals are just sort of like running away and they're reacting to her mostly like animals do before any of them ever talk. A lot of moments that are really important that if you didn't have the audio description track, you wouldn't know in terms of the story. Like she falls on something that sort of sets the course for the whole movie. And if you didn't know that, she doesn't say it out loud. You know what I'm saying? So it would come up later on and you'd just be like, oh, like the dialogue doesn't come until like an hour, at least an hour later into the movie. So it has a lot of like visual humor in it too, with trying with the concept, the humor of a fox and a robot raising a baby gosling, you know. So I thought the scene. I mean, there's so many scenes where like Roz is sacrificing herself along the way, and like she loses a body part and has to like put like a temporary leg on. There's a lot to describe in Wild Robot, and I thought this was an excellent audio description track, so it made the cut. Moving up the list,
Cap Beverly Cap Hill Cap Cop Cap.
Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Action movie, had some great action sequences. I really loved. This is one I actually remember the narrator. I thought Thomas Reed did a great job narrating this. I thought he was like perfect narrator for this too. I just thought this track nailed it. It could have just coasted, but this film has comedy, it has action, it has set pieces. The hanging of the car off the side of a building, that's an interesting set piece. I'm glad I got to know about that. So, there's some really specific stuff, like including Kevin Bacon and the way he's dressed. So, I'm not even reading these from notes. These are things that I remember from the movie. This is how much the movie made an impact. So I love Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. It's on the list. Moving up.
Cap Abigail.
Abigail. I've seen this movie twice. Honestly, the second time through, I bumped it up a little bit. Moved up. It was already on the list, but it just moved up like a couple places. I love this movie. Like leans in on the audio description and isn't like afraid. It's gory as hell in certain scenes, and jumps out at you. And I don't want to ruin the movie because this is another movie. It's not quite like Strange Darling because I think people have figured out what Abigail is by now. But in case you haven't, it's best for you to go and watch Abigail. It is a horror movie. I'll say that. That's all you need to know. And it's gory. So, but yeah, I thought the gore was really well described in this movie. And then sort of like the final scene and the way that it happens, loved it. So, moving up the list,
Cap Deadpool and Cap
Deadpool and Wolverine. I love everything about it. I mean, I've seen this movie twice. The bye 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 sequence, the the random references, the fact that it doesn't try to like describe to you who they are. They figure, well, you're in the third movie in the franchise and we need to address some of these cameos. Probably the best one right away is the Chris Evans joke. It has to work a certain way, so the audio description goes with it the way that the movie is going with it. So that works out really well too. But also all the little characters that pop up in Cassandra's army, they're just sort of described. We're told immediately who they are instead of trying to do like the old school way of like, this is what this person looks like. I don't know what their name is because they haven't used the name yet. Don't want to use the name. Fuck that. It's just like, that's Juggernaut. You're a comic book nerd. You're here. You know who Juggernaut is. It's fine. I mean, this is fan service. It's a movie for fan service, and you're a fan. I'm going to service you also through the audio description. So I like this track. It deserves to be here. Moving up the list.
Cap Furiosa.
Furiosa. I've seen this twice. This has some excellent audio description. You also have a female lead that is mostly nonverbal. Even when she becomes Anya Taylor-Joy, she still doesn't talk a whole lot. I mean, this is not a dialogue-heavy movie for a lead character. Furiosa is a very silent but deadly person. But certainly the child doesn't communicate a lot verbally. So there's a little bit of ASL, like sign language in it. And yeah, I thought the violence and everything too, and sort of there are times where it's like things are gross and like people have gross teeth and they're living dirty, you know what I'm saying? And that's sort of George Miller's like grunginess. I've seen the other Mad Max movies before visually, and there's a certain style that his movies had, a look to them. And so to try to capture that and put it in the audio description, I thought the track was really nice. It did that very well. And then sort of the violence and the gore and the answer to the question of what happened to Furiosa's arm. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, that's not a spoiler. If you watch these movies in sequential order of like when they were released, you would be wondering that same question. You'd be like, doesn't she? I remember in the movie, first movie. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of great stuff that happened to Furiosa. Moving up the list,
Cap Rebel Cap Moons.
I just put Rebel Moons. So I actually remember who did this because I had to listen to 3 of these fucking things. And Jamie Lemchak is the narrator here. I want to say, is it Dakota that wrote this or is it Liz? Either Liz or Dakota wrote this. And they had to write fucking 3 tracks for Rebel Moon. They had to write the Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scar Giver. And then they had to go back through and write 2 directors' versions of this movie. And when you have to write like wildly different versions of the same movie, you can't just be like, well, the other version was this. It's like it's a brand new movie for you, but then you realize that these writers that they have to sit through, they're doing the Lord's work on some of these things. Rebel Moon is one of the worst movies of the year, but it's also very visual. It's also extremely violent and gory, especially the director's cuts, which are R-rated. We never needed more than one version of Rebel Moon. I blame Zack Snyder and his bullshit ego, but we got them. And so because this team had to describe and write 3 different Rebel Moon audio description tracks in the same year, this movie made my list as a collective trilogy of shit. That movie is terrible, but the audio description is excellent. It's so gory. The movie is so violent, especially in the director's cuts. The Scargiver has some stuff to it, but definitely by the time you get to part 1 and part 2 director's cuts, yeah, I mean the violence is just like random and over the top. So, and Jamie did a really nice job narrating. There's also sex too. I forgot that. They have to throw in the extra sex. This is easily the worst movie. This is the worst movie I think that's on my list. By the way, that made the cut for best of. Rebel Moon is nowhere else to be found on any other list that I've made this year. I didn't put it anywhere else. And it's worse than Mea Culpa, which would have been maybe the other film I would have said that's not a good movie, but deserves to be on the list.
Cap Emilia Cap Perez.
Next up is Emilia Perez, a film that I'm having increasingly conflicted opinions about. I reviewed the movie once without audio description and bitched about it, and because again, Netflix didn't have audio description when they originally released this movie. They bought it at Cannes. They had since May to make a track for it. It was going around to festivals without audio description. They had to do a 2-week qualifying run in theaters, and they were perfectly happy doing that without audio description. They were sending it out to me as a film critic, blind film critic, and my screener for Maria had audio description, but my screener for Emilia Perez did not have English audio description on it, so I know I didn't get that. I reached out to the rep. They were like, no English audio description track exists for this in November, so I reviewed the movie, and I bitched about how we should have access to this. This is obviously their big Oscar contender, and they have a bad habit of taking their Spanish language Oscar contenders and never putting audio description on them. Like we have Roma and Bardot and El Conde, which have all been nominated for the Academy at the Oscars. None of them have audio description, and they're all Netflix movies. What do they all have in common? They're all Spanish language. So I was kind of surprised that they ended up putting audio description on Emilia Perez late. But when they did, and I've seen some dumbass went onto the forum, and yeah, I'm calling you a dumbass. You may see this on the forum. You may have clicked on the video, and they were like, I'm sighted, and this audio description track is distracting. And I'm like, Okay, let me explain some things to you. First of all, it's not for you. I mean, I love the side that people use it, but this movie would have been completely inaccessible without audio description to people who don't speak Spanish, who can't use the Spanish audio description track. So we need this. So sit down. And secondly, I'm positive from from the little bit that I know and understand, I think they had a really short turnaround on this because this thing came out. They had the audio description within like 3 weeks of winning the Golden Globe. And I'm thinking, what were the moments that prompted Netflix to add audio description? Was it winning the Golden Globe or was it being nominated for the Golden Globe? Nominated gives them a little bit more time because that puts it at the beginning of December, early December, not beginning of, but like early December would have given them about a month and a half to make an audio description track, which still is not a ton of time to go from writing to recording to QC, to get the whole thing through. It would explain why there's not a dub, why it's just audio description. So I think it's actually possible that they commissioned this when they won the Golden Globe. I think there might have been a 2-week turnaround on this. That's where I'm at because I don't trust Netflix enough. I think they may have actually commissioned an audio description track that when International Digital Center got this, they went crunch mode on this. And Liz had to sit down and spend like 24 hours watching Emilia Press nonstop so she could write a script that could immediately be handed out while they were scrambling to find voice talent to do this, and record it and get the recordings in and then, mix it and have some quality check, all of that I think happened in a very limited amount of time. So, kudos, bravo. Is this movie going to hold up well? I have no idea. This movie has hate coming from every direction and love because, we want to stand up and support the trans community. Carla's making that real hard. So again, some people shouldn't have social media. It's just like, it's making it really, it's kind of putting that little sort of just a bad taste on that first sort of historic nomination at a time when transgender rights are like being stripped away in America. And I know everybody would love to vote for this film and love to stick it to the man. I don't think it's the right film. I just don't think this is the right movie to do it with. I think the fact that it got nominated, I think the fact that Carla got nominated, those are the wins. And I think the audio description track, especially, even though, I critiqued it. I had to critique what was there. And certainly, had they been given more time, they could, some things we could have done differently, but I think they had about 2 weeks to do this. So it's really high on my list for that reason. So, I didn't put Wicked on here because I don't like audio description tracks that describe dancing while the song is going on. I'm here for the music. I'm sorry. So Wicked didn't make the cut. Wicked has a lot of great audio description in it, but it also interrupts my songs. And that's just personal preference. And I know there are other people who don't mind it and they want their songs to be interrupted. I don't. I'm a music theater purist. I came here to hear the music. The rest of it, I get it. It's for a visual audience and people. I know why it's not here. I fully acknowledge it. And I'm not going to bitch about it. I'm not complaining. I'm not shouting at the people of Wicked. My review of Wicked is it's just there. I didn't go after the track. But if you're wondering where's Wicked, because here's Emilia Perez, that's why. I have seen it with audio description. And that's how I prefer my audio description tracks. So, moving up the list. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. There's a lot of description here. I think this Jedediah Barton did this. I feel like that's right. weird when I actually can remember parts of it. Yeah, lots of action, the monkeys and sorry, the apes. It's in the title. You think I'd remember? Um, and uh, I mean, the way that they communicate, the talking versus not talking, and all the different things throughout the whole, and the humans here have sort of degraded too. We have sort of like feral humans, and so that's different. And I love this franchise. I think it's always well described. I don't think I ever ran into a problem with any of the movies, and I saw the first three visually, and I've listened to all their audio description tracks. So Kingdom just sort of lived up to the greatness of the franchise. There's another monkey movie, actually more monkey movies this year. It was a great year for monkeys. Uh, moving up the list
Cap Monkey Cap.
is Monkey Man, Dev Patel's movie, which is again like nonstop action. I had John Wick was my number one track for last year, John Wick Chapter 4, because it balanced action, and it wasn't just nonstop audio description. It actually had nuance to it. It had levels. Like there was dialogue. It wasn't just only audio description, because there were a couple of movies last year that were just audio description, and I put them at like 2 and 3. Um, and I like films that are lots of audio description, but it's not just because the film is audio description, because the film is solely audio description. We wouldn't be able to watch it otherwise. Monkey Man is very reliant upon audio description. And the action sequences are really well done. Yeah, so check it out. If you haven't seen it, it's worth the audio description. Moving up the list to
Cap Queer.
Queer. I've seen this movie twice, and leaning in on the sexually explicit audio description is absolutely where it needed to go. Even the use of specific words like "come" is, yeah. I mean, thank you for knowing what the tone of the movie is and knowing how to go. But there are sexually explicit scenes in this movie, and some stuff that I like 20 years ago would have earned an NC-17 rating, and they put it straight in the audio description. They ran right into it, and I appreciate that. So yeah, Queer made my list. It's it also has a very weird third act. Very weird third act to it. I can't stress that enough. And I thought the audio description did really well with that too. So, moving up the list,
Cap, it's misspelled Cap.
it's What's Inside. And I had to think about this too. Because technically I shouldn't have this on the list. And I technically have worked on this audio description track, but I was impressed with the audio description track when it was given to me. So it was already excellent, and the movie already has to navigate some really deceptively hard things. This is a movie that I'm glad I got an opportunity to ever comment on it and see it in advance, because it's brilliant in how to follow the beats. Because if you haven't seen It's What's Inside, which I've seen the most of any film this year, I'll just say that for reasons that I had to, it takes place in this house, sort of modern, and it does kind of matter. There are tips to what certain people look like. There is ethnic audio description in here, like racial specific audio description. But these people are swapping into bodies, and so like different people are in different bodies. So you're following sort of like their soul. So it has to describe to you like who's in what body. So and then they swap multiple times. So it's like who's in what body, and then sort of it really matters at a certain point when something happens as to certain bodies and certain people. And then the whole, well, do we switch back? Like what happens? What are we doing? And then there are times where it shows you, it does sort of like almost like an x-ray, where even though the body, it'll show you the actual person who's standing there. So it has moments like that too. There are plenty of moments where it's interesting, and because of the body swap nature, I don't want to just not put it on the list because I happen to work on it. It has to be on the list. It has to be on this list for excellence in audio description. I can't be the reason that this doesn't exist on a list. This has to just be on here for a reason. Um, so I can't put it number one. I realize that that's a little bit much. So I try to be as fair as possible as where would I put this thing, where, based on when I first heard this, where would I put this? And this is where I would have put this. So moving up the list. Azrael. This is one of those films that I was saying is fully reliant upon audio description because there's no dialogue. It's basically A Quiet Place on crack. So like they're in hell essentially, and their lives are so terrible, and the movie it's so violent and gory and horrific that and they don't want it. They can't make any sound, and they're so afraid to make sound that they've actually like removed their vocal cords. They cut their vocal cords so they can't make sound as people. So no one in this movie talks. Samara Weaving never speaks. So the whole movie's audio description, and it's a horror movie, and there's no talking. So of course this movie makes the list. It has to. Like this again, this is what I'm talking about. Like some of those movies that are fully reliant upon audio description. Like Quiet Place has some stuff in it, like some whispering or some noise, it has some stuff. It's not 100%. This one is. So moving up the list. Godzilla X Kong. Wow, we have weird creatures, big fighting sequences. We have a gorilla that communicates using ASL. So many things here. We have a weird tribe that comes out and speaks in a different language. Lots of things in Godzilla X Kong that, I don't know. There's just so much in this movie that happened. That the little baby Kong, I don't know what to call him. There's so many things in this movie that I was just like, this movie is audio description. It essentially has two nonverbal leads in Godzilla and Kong. They don't really, Kong speaks through ASL, so he needs that translated in audio description. But yeah, it's way up there on my list from last year. Moving up the list is Dune Part 2. This is my number 3 audio description track of the year. I now know where I am on my list. Again, I lost myself for a while, but I'm back. Again, Dune, a visual feast. Lots of things to capture here. Sci-fi film. The Dune films would be really hard. The Dune films already are hard for me to follow, so I can't even imagine trying to watch it without audio description. This actually, I'm really happy. The way that we do audio description awards is kind of weird. So like Dune Part 2, I think, was already nominated and won for audio description for last year because we overlapped in a weird way. So I think Dune was already on the list. So it's not eligible for the year of actual audio description awards. I was really happy. I think it did win for film. I believe it did win for film. It deserves to. Of the nominees, I was like, Dune, I voted for Dune. That's why I remember it, is because I remember voting for it. So, moving up the list. What are the two that I thought were actually better than the thing I actually voted for? Well, there were two that came out after Dune and have a chance to be nominated this year, and I hope they are. Number 2 is, the runner-up for Best Audio Description Track of the Year is Sasquatch Sunset. William Michael Redmond narrated this. I remember that. This film is, again, heavily reliant upon audio description. And the movie wouldn't make sense. I promise you, it's sort of like I wish Flow had audio description this year, because that movie is fully reliant upon the existence of audio description. So it's 100% impossible to follow without it. Because there's no dialogue in that movie. Sasquatch Sunset is a movie about Sasquatches, a family of Sasquatches, and they don't speak. So you have to know what they're doing. The movie is also crude, and it takes itself sort of like a weird nature documentary and it has a lot of things in it that you're like, oh, I don't know about that, you know. But whereas Azrael had to lean into horror, and a lot of films, it's like, well, great, thank you for describing that really horrific thing that just happened. Sasquatch Sunset had to describe a whole lot of just weird things, weird sex things, weird gross things, uh, death. I don't know. There's just a whole bunch of things that happen here. This movie is everything but the kitchen sink. So why didn't it win? Because I told you I like to have a film that wins that not only has excellent audio description, but also has some dialogue. So that way it's not like I'm just saying the film with the most audio description wins. Sometimes they said that about the Oscars with editing. Sometimes the film with the most editing wins. I don't do that. I think it's got to be a marriage. It's got to be both. So while my runner-up certainly has the most audio description, the best audio description of the year, I think, was The Substance. I've seen that movie twice. And there's so many things about The Substance. First of all, if you take the non-gore element of it, Demi Moore's scene where she's getting ready to go out is iconic and so well described. Dennis Quaid eating food, so well described. Margaret Qualley doing workout videos, so well described. None of those things have anything to do with horror. When you get into the horror element of it, the gore, my God. This film is fully reliant upon that. It is disgusting and extremely gory. And all the way up into the end of the film, when that last little bit is like crawling along to get on that Hollywood Walk of Fame, it's like relentless. Like the last 30 to 45 minutes of the movie are pretty hardcore. And I really appreciate this track. So congratulations to The Substance for winning Best Audio Description Track of the Year. Also, what makes this track unique is that it's from Mubi. So maybe this is a little bone to throw to Mubi to say, hey you just dipped your toe into an audio description this year. Thanks for doing that. Now it'd be great if you could make sure that your streaming service also had audio description so that people have, another service to go to watch these movies. But continue on that good work of embracing audio description. So unlikely distributor to have won this year, because prior to 2024, I'm not sure Mubi was doing audio description. So kudos. Anyway, The Substance wins Best Audio Description. The Substance has also won some other categories this year for me, and I still have my Best Pictures of the Year list to do, so I guess you're going to wonder where The Substance is on there. But The Substance has definitely won at least one of my other Best of 2024 lists, so you just have to figure out which one. Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the other side.